Hey guys, it's Iconic, and I wanted to give a quick update on my league start experience so far, and just have like a preliminary guide because I've had a lot of questions on being asked as to how I started, and just people wanted to follow along. So this video is going to also be a sort of mini guide just for people wanting to follow along. Just keep in mind that whatever you see here is still very subject to change as I play through the end game and I test and all of that good stuff. At the time of recording though, the highest map that I have dropped is a T5 map. So most of the footage you'll be seeing is from T5s and lower. So first things first, I want to preface this by saying GGG are making changes to make the experience better overall for league starting minions. So my experience is not necessarily what you might experience, especially after the buffs that came in last night, for me at least. Now, in case you don't know what exactly the changes are, they have reduced monster life through the campaign, so you have less life to have to work through. And then they have also buffed minion life and damage. Though minion life not as much, but damage has seen a decent increase from where it was at initially. So overall, this should mean that you take less time clearing packs, bosses don't feel as much of a slog, and your minions should die less. Now, it should be noted that in the PoE you will see, one thing I did to, I guess, account for the nerfs to minion survivability and all, especially hearing Gaz's experience in the end game with skeletal storm mages, is when I first got them, I noticed their damage was pretty nice. I expect a decent amount into their damage at this point, and it wasn't great. It was bad, but it was okay for its time, all things considered, with mob life being what it was, and being pre-buffed, right? So what I did was, because their damage was so much better than the competition, I ended up speccing into minion defenses. And what do I mean by that? It means I capped their resistances and tried to give them as much PDR as I could. I couldn't fit in a chaos res with my level, but that was fine. Having to spec a bit more into minion defenses meant that they were pretty tanky. And overall, once I did that, it solved all the issues I had with them dying too often. They still died, don't get me wrong. It's not like it just made them immortal or something. But if they died every single pack before, they were dying like once every 5 packs or 6 packs. And it wouldn't be like all of them, it'd be like 1 or 2. So very, very big change, I would say, because at the end of the day, if you feel like your DPS is low and they're spending a lot of time dead, then making sure they are alive to actually deal damage is probably a better DPS increase than like 10% increase minion damage or whatever else you might pick on the tree. So this is the reason we are as heavily spec'd into minion defenses as you would see on the tree. And this honestly keeps being the case all through the game, I would say, including till end game, except once you start getting more towards end game, I am trying to fit in more like minion chaos res, and I have also spent less nodes to get more resistances, just because now we have access to like separate areas on the tree. If you're enjoying the video, do consider liking and subscribing, as not only does it help out with the algorithm, but we are also less than 100 subs till we get monetized. And also, we have a face reveal on YouTube and stream if we get to 2,000 subs before the end of 2025. So if any of that interests you, be sure to hit that sub button. Now for Specters. My initial plan for league starting was Specters, but so far Specters have been very underwhelming, with the vast majority of their functionality just not even working. Basically, as of the time of recording, you cannot rebind Specters, though they have mentioned that you can. They want to implement the feature where you can take the same gem and get a different Specter, but for now it's not in the game. So if I were to show you my stash tab, you see like over 15 bind Specter gems just testing different things. And so far the minion community has really only found one that has been actual competition for like skeletal minions, and that is the Valguards. Now the Valguards are very strong, they do a lot of damage and all, but the reason there are a couple of reasons why I didn't go for Valguards over skeletal over my storm mages. And reason number one is the playstyle. With playing Valguard, it essentially feels like you're playing with Arsonists, but Specters with higher mana cost, or higher spirit cost rather, or reservation, but they are much better than Arsonists. So it's not like they are worse than Arsonists. They are better than Arsonists. They're just Arsonists but Specters. And I didn't really want to go for an Arsonist-esque playstyle. And not only that, they somehow even managed to get less visibility than Arsonists got, and I already didn't like how little we saw when it came to Arsonists, especially considering how many like ground effects there really are in the game, and how, I don't know, GGG likes to balance around the ground effects, I guess. I don't know. I just didn't enjoy the idea of not being able to see the ground. So this is why we're going Storm Mages. Now, on the Storm Mage front, as to why I actually went them over Valguard, they obviously, they can't miss. That's a big thing. When you are running around trying to avoid hits, there's a very big thing where Valguards could potentially miss with their grenades, because they do have to throw a grenade, and that grenade then has to detonate. So they can miss or only hit with one, and if they only hit with one, then you have a big less damage multiplier from your scatter shot and all these things. Storm Mages do not need a less damage multiplier to hit multiple enemies. They were actually buffed in the patch notes to, they went from only chaining to 2 enemies to actually scaling with levels, to going from 2 at level 1 to chaining to 4 enemies at level 20. So this means wave clear is really good at level 20, and PoEDB doesn't show this change, so I can't really say how if it scales past 4, but my guess would be at level 30-ish, maybe level 25-ish, it'll get to 5, and that'll probably be where it peaks out. Now, another reason to go Storm Mages is just you'll just have permanent shock, having so many minions doing lightning damage. We also have one downside, I guess, it's harder to get exposure, because the way we get exposure is by having a separate Storm Mage set up to actually apply a bigger shock and having exposure. But that minion's uptime on shock is not that great, but it's still better than what we'd get otherwise, because it's still a decent amount of less res. But Valguards, on the other hand, just come with exposure by themselves, so that's a disadvantage for Storm Mage versus Valguards. But yeah, let's hop right into the POB so you can actually see what it is that I have planned. Basically, this POB, I literally just put it before this video because I didn't have a POB sketched out for what I wanted to do. But I finally have a decent idea of where the build is going now that I'm in maps and I see what the damage looks like, especially after the buffs. So I've cooked up a POB. It still isn't complete. The skill section is empty as of time of recording, but I will be adding some more details and fine-tuning it after recording and everything. So when you guys open the link, it should be complete, basically. Now, I'll try to be as quick as I can while explaining as much as I can when regarding the POB. But for newer players who are not quite as good with POB, it's very important to note that there are skill trees at the bottom left over here, where you can choose to see like different setups that have been created. I have created a leveling setup, so you see the point priority where you should be going at different points, just because I know that right now people are not all in end game or at max level, and it can be confusing seeing a whole picture without seeing how to get there. So it's kind of like I try to break it up in like 15 point chunks. Now some of them I adjusted after the fact, so the points don't quite line up, but it is what it is. But this is essentially how you would prioritize getting your points all through as you level up. I try to make it as easy and as understandable as possible. And of course, Ascendancy nodes, we are going for Necromantic Conduit. Then second Ascendancy, we get Blackened Heart. Third Ascendancy, I'm pretty sure we get, yeah, Soulless Form, and then fourth Crystalline Phylactery. This one, to explain why we go for that just really briefly, this is Unholy Might, basically. You just need to make sure you have mana. So once you take this, you're losing mana per second. To combat this, you just need to take these 2 nodes and you stop losing mana. Once you have those 2 nodes, this is essentially free. But when you do cast spells, you will need to press your mana flask to get back the mana. As you level up though, you get a lot of like different sources of mana regen to compensate. So you don't really have to press mana flask all that much. As you would see, we have decent mana regen on the left over there. And that is with the DJ. That is with the DJ, correct. And Unholy Might is a buff that gives you your minions damage as extra chaos, starting out at 30%. This just means they're doing chaos damage as well. Pretty nice buff. And then this makes it so it scales with mana. So you'd see that we have a lot of mana. We're trying to scale the effect as much as possible. Now, I haven't quite decided if I want to use Withering Presence but I do want to employ some ways to increase the chaos portion of the hit. So there is a universe where we end up dropping these two and going for these two instead. That way we can have despair, and maybe I consider running one on blasphemy. But that would be an end game setup most likely when we have a lot of spirit to work with. But starting out, we definitely don't want to do that. But I will play around with it and see. There is also this node right here that gives withered on hit. The problem with this node is it's essentially an annoyance because we don't really have much use for AoE on storm mages, except maybe their active ability, but nobody uses the active ability, so it's whatever. So moving on to the item section, I'm just going to go over like priorities real quick, what to prioritize on each gear piece and whatnot. So on the Scepter, your priority would be plus the level of minion skills and then spirit. Everything else is secondary. Presence AoE is nice quality of life, so you can be a bit further away from your minions while they'll still be affected by Unholy Might. There is some scaling on the tree, so it's not quite as important, but it's nice to have. And then of course damage is self-explanatory. Mana is obviously good. For your shield, you want to prioritize life and block chance. For every piece of gear you have, you want to prioritize life. Life comes first, except when there's like minion skills, as an example on the helmet, or spirit on the chest piece. Life then goes second, but you 100% still want to get life there. Anyways, so flat life on the helmet is the priority. Actually, no, level on the helmet is priority, then life, then ES. You want to get ES because flat ES on gear is converted to mana with Eldritch Battery. Keep in mind, nodes like this that give increased max ES do not affect that ES. It is converted, and as such, modifiers ES do not affect it. But increased ES on gear is local, so it would make it so that the gear gives you more flat ES. So that's why we go for increased ES on gear. Then the chest piece, same thing. The reason we're not on a pure ES base is just because of the spirits on the implicit. Without this base, I would go for a pure ES chest piece. So the spirit is the priority, then life, then anything else. Gloves, life, then life, mana, ES. Actually, life, ES, mana. Because no, actually no. Mana comes over ES on the gloves. Then for boots, movement speed is king, then life, and then ES. Amulets, level is priority, spirit is next, and then life is third. And then ring is just life, mana. And keep in mind, all these pieces, you want to get resistances. You want to cap out all your resistances. I have it in the config to just simulate what the actual like defensive layers would look like. But you want to get, I left every suffix open, so you had plenty of leeway to cap your resistances basically. And then charm, you probably want to get anti-freeze just because freeze feels very bad. Stun is unnecessary because with stun, the game already has an anti-stun mechanic where if you get stunned, you're less likely to get stunned if it's been recent. So it's kind of anti-stun in that regard. Freeze is just the most problematic ailment. You don't run into it often, but when you do, it will probably kill you if you don't have the charm. And then for jewels, this is going to be all you're going for here is attack has speed priority, minion damage secondary, and then chaos res is really nice to have. But for the ruby, the priority here is block chance, the implicit. You want a corrupted one that has corrupted blood cannot be inflicted, and then minion PDR is also really nice to have. And then we have prism of belief for ultra endgame. And for your on your ascendancy node, you're going to be putting a similar jewel to this, i.e. just damage and attack has speed would go in there, which would be decent damage. We aren't really scaling crit this time because they have hard nerfed our access to spirit to critical weakness, and that was really carrying minion crit chance. It might still be worth DPS wise to have some crit scaling, but I don't think it is going to be nearly as viable, especially with how little like jewel sockets we actually have available to us. We only have 3 on here, pseudo 2 on the ascendancy because of the increased effect. So pseudo 2 on the ascendancy, and then 2 on the, or 3 on the passive tree. Not a lot of ways to scale minion crit with just that limited of resources. But I will consider it, and I will play around with the numbers and see what comes out more efficient. And then other defensive layers include block. We have 65% block chance, mostly coming from here, the base block chance, and the ruby jewel. Needless to say, League starting minions was painful, but it should at least be a better experience now for the people still going through it. I will be making follow-up videos for those interested in how the journey is going. I'll also be going live shortly after this video is posted. So if you have any questions or want to see the progress in real time, then you can stop by. Do consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the content, as we are closing in on 1,000 subscribers. And with all that said, thank you for watching.